First of all, thank you so much. It's really great to be in Amsterdam and really great to be with you all. We're so lucky. You know, I think I've fallen in love with, and no, I'm not gay. I know a lot of people think I am, but I've fallen in love with about 10 women already today. They're so cool just to hear and what they do when they decide to follow their own intuition and their own inner voice, which is really a big part of my story. I'm going to take a sip of water. I have 18 minutes. It's a long time. I do this about 5 times, and I kill 32 seconds, I found. Very good water. I think today, the topic that I chose to speak about is called WOW, which is Women of the World. And I'm a bit of like a neo kind of pop punk girl, and I try to really look at ancient concepts and try to find ways to speak about them in easy to understand ways. And for me, I love women so much, and I'm obsessed with the feminine, and started out on a search, not even knowing what I was doing, about what it meant to be feminine. And I didn't know at the time things like, when I was little, that there were issues and discrimination against women, and that people spoke to their babies, you know, the girls, different than the boys from the time that we were born. And of course, I didn't know any of that because I grew up in Syracuse, New York. And Syracuse, New York, I don't know what the equivalent would be in Amsterdam, but it's a very, very small place, about 60 miles from the Canadian border. It's very blue collar, meaning it's not a wealthy community. The people usually work in factories, or they make about probably $50,000 for a family of 4. The goals, you know, it's very family oriented. You play hockey. We're big skaters because we don't have enough money to go skiing, so the whole town skates. And when I was about 10 years old, I decided that I wanted to become an umpire because I could work outside, hang out with boys, and get tan. And this is when my acumen for business started to kick in, because I was multitasking. I was seeing cute boys, getting tan, and getting paid to be at the park. And at that time, I was basically booed by all the moms. And I was the first girl umpire in my town. And that's when I started to see that things weren't the same for the girls and the boys. So as I went through school, it was time to go to college, and I decided that I wanted to be a poetry major and go to the University of Oahu in Hawaii. And no one in my family had ever gone to college, and my mother said, absolutely not. You are going to become a nurse, because if you become a nurse, you can always have a job and you'll always have a way of supporting yourself. And I was like, well, I don't really like sick people. Like, they really kind of bother me. I don't really think that's going to be a good profession for me. She's like, if you want to go to college, you're going to become a nurse. And I really, really, really wanted to leave home. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to nursing school. So I get to college, and there's about 400 girls from farms, because by this point women had, not that there's anything wrong with being a nurse, but it's not, well, I don't know, I don't want to diss nurses, but it's not like the top of the food chain, in my opinion, because I think you should be a doctor because, you know, you have more power and you make more money and you can do more good, but that's a separate issue. And if people are watching this on the internet and they're nurses and they want to send me hate mail, you can send it to 62 Grand Street, New York, 10013. You know, it started with like all these kind of like really old nursing instructors, and they looked at me and they were like, you're never going to make it through this program. And, you know, all I need is a dare. So my first day at nursing school, I had like a Dorothy Hamill haircut, like asymmetrical, kind of shaved on this side like Adam Ant. It was 1983, and kind of like a long bob on the other side with a braid. And all the other girls wore nursing dresses, and I wore like 3/4 length white gauchos with like a little scrub shirt, and I had a stethoscope and white stockings and white clogs. And I'd like to walk around the town where my college was and pretend that I was a doctor. You know how like, when you see people, you're not sure if they're an orderly or a doctor. Like, you're like, he's kind of hot. And then you're like, I wonder if he's an orderly or a doctor, because they all look the same. You all wear the same outfit. So I was really into my outfit. And they give you patients that are basically 2 steps away from death's door, because they have a lot of things wrong with them. So they always want to give you like a diabetic who has chronic obstructive pulmonary disease with some bed sores and a catheter and low blood pressure and dementia. So they'll like start swatting at, you have to be able to learn a lot of diseases at once because you only have 6 weeks per rotation. So anyway, my first patient's name was Donald, and he had a lot wrong with him. And I went into the room to see Donald, and I was scared because Donald was like, and I was just like, oh, this is not for me. So I grabbed his chart, like I went kind of close to his bed, and I grabbed his chart, and I just went blood pressure, 120/80. I think that's a good blood pressure. Pulse, 50. By the way, a hospital is not a safe place to be. I'm here to tell you that there are a lot of people that work there that aren't doing their jobs, like me that day. And the one thing that I learned in nursing school was that before people die, they start to do this thing called picking at air. And they go like this. I don't know why, if they're seeing spots or if it's like a sodium-potassium pump thing and your brain and your cardiac, I don't really know. But they start to pick at air. It's like a common thing if you work in a hospital. So all of a sudden, Donald started to go. And I was like, oh my God, he's gonna die. So I went running down to the nurse's station. I'm like, my patient's gonna die. He's gonna die. And by the time they got back in there, Donald had left the building. Like literally, he was dead. And I was like, oh my God, this is a bad sign. This is a really bad sign. It's my first day of nursing school. My patient's dead, and this is not for me. This is not for me. And I called my mom, and I was like, Mom, and I was crying, and I had to go to a payphone because there weren't cell phones then. And I was like, Mom, my patient's dead. I'm not supposed to be a nurse. This is really, really bad. And she was like, guess what? You're in a hospital. Deal with it. You're a nurse. You're going to be a nurse. Sick people die. That's what happens. That's why you're a nurse. You're there to help them. And so the point of this whole thing is that I really believe that there are so many people that aren't living their lives and doing what they do. So I went through nursing school, and I got to New York City, and within pretty much 3 or 4 weeks of being in New York City, I quit my job as a nurse, and I became a full-time party girl. Which was really good, and I'll tell you why. That was a mistake, and how funny was that? Who did that? Was that on purpose? That was genius. I'm here to talk about the divine universal mother, which we're going to be getting to later, but that was a foreshadowing of what happens when you're in your truth. That was really funny. If you have any other music, just do it, whenever you think. I'm going to have another 10-second sip of water. 7 minutes. I kind of like it. What do you guys think about it? I'm just wondering who it is and what they're actually doing. I'll take another water as long as you're over there. So my point is that what I learned about myself at that time is that my whole life I'd been living someone else's life. And I also learned from employing, 24 women over the last 15 years that moms, which is wow upside down. My manager, David Cotico, told me to get that in. So there you go, David. I hope you like the fact he figured that out today. But everything comes from a mother. And so my whole thing is that moms are really big programmers, and they start to program us. My mom is still programming me, and I'm 46 years old. My mom calls me every day, and she goes, Kelly, are you going to get married? Are you going to settle down? I go, Mom, I've been married twice. I have a child with another person. I really don't think I'm the marrying type. And she goes, what would you do if you had a stroke? Who would take care of you? I'm like, Mom, if I had a stroke, I don't think some guy that I married at 50 is going to be hanging around if I can't move, But they program us, and they really start really early on. And one of the things that I found out is that I was living my life for other people, and it didn't stop it. It didn't stop at college and nursing school. It kept going because all of a sudden then I was in New York, and it was my job to become really pretty, really skinny, really rich, married, and super successful, which I also did, like the perfect little video game. So I get to New York, I'm like a size 2, I'm a party girl, and I end up meeting Andy Warhol's protege, famous artist. Movie Slaves of New York is about him. Lock him down. The first time I went to his house, I was like so fresh and off the boat, I was like, what happened to all your plants? And he goes, oh, my ex-girlfriend used to want me to hang her from the ceiling. And I'm like, do you want to get married? Next thing you know, in 6 months, I'm married to an artist. And And then, so I had the husband. Then I got a job as a publicist. My first job, I was living as a party girl in New York, and I was living on the couch of Anthony Hayden Guest. I'd been evicted from my apartment. I was homeless for a while, but I was homeless on Park Avenue, which is not that bad, on a couch. And I would go out every night and just party on the scene and met a lot of people, like Pink Floyd. Like, I didn't know who they were, like Tim Leary. I just didn't know who any of these people were because I was from Syracuse and I was a nurse. I didn't know any of these things. But I learned a lot, and it was incredibly good for networking. And one day, somebody said to me, you should become a publicist. And I said, well, what is that? And he said, it's what you do all day. You just talk and put people together. So I was like, okay. So like a little feather, I flew into Susan Blonde's office, who's a very famous music publicist who does like Julio, Iglesias, and Tammy Wynette, and Pet Shop Boys, and Michael Jackson. She did forever. And I took a test to become her assistant, and I got every question wrong because I knew nothing, except for what was porthenol, which was a type of lace. And I knew it because my grandmother was from Italy. And so she said, oh my God, you got every question wrong except this one question, which no one's ever gotten right. Would you like to be my assistant? And I said, well, sure. And so, you know, that was the start. You know, my first gig, again, multitasking. I could get paid, travel on private jets, sleep with rock stars, and have backstage passes. It was an amazing job. I was a music publicist, so I traveled with, I had a really good time. Let's just put it that way. I had a very good time. From there, I decided that it was time to keep the game going, right? Because I'd been programmed that we need to be really, really successful, really pretty, really happening, really famous, especially now, like in the media, like fame's like a really big thing. When they interview young kids, the one thing that they want to be more than anything is famous. They don't want to be enlightened. They don't want to be empowered. They don't want to be kind. They don't want to be collaborative. They don't want to be creative. They want to be famous. Really interesting. So, you know, I was doing my part to keep up the expectations of the programming, and I was doing really well. And I ended up leaving that job, and I got a job as the director of PR at Spin Magazine working with Bob Cutrone, which meant I was the director of myself because there was no one else in the PR department. And then from there, I decided at the age of like 23 or 22 to start my own PR company. And it was because I do not play well with others. I do not work well in a corporate environment. I don't follow directions, and I don't want to be told what to do. This is a fantastic, and this is another thing. I make money off my character defects. So if people tell you that you're really annoying and there's a lot wrong with you, my thing is great, because this is a great way for you to become successful. So my thing was I always talked too much. I couldn't help put people together, right? Now I'm a publicist, and it's great. I've made a fortune being a publicist. So the whole, so when I started my own PR company, then things just started to grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was working with people like Frank Sinatra and doing the Times Square ball drop and all of these things, except there was one problem. I wasn't happy. I had no sense of myself. I had no idea who I was. And as a matter of fact, I was out one time with Naomi Campbell, as you tend to do in the 80s, on my way to a really wild club in the meatpacking district called The Vault. And we lived on Christopher Street, which was a big transsexual kind of hooker street in the West Village at the time. And we were trying to get a taxi, and the cab driver screamed out to us, I don't pick up drag queens. And Naomi went running over and slammed her hand on his car and said, don't you know who I am? I'm a supermodel. And then I realized, like, oh my God, like I have no concept of who I am. Like my whole life and everybody's life in New York, especially at that time, was kind of based on, you know, hi, what do you do? Not how are you, not who are you, but what do you do? And so I'd built up this whole life, which I had no sense of myself at all. I did not know who I was. I did not know what I wanted. I did not know what I believed in. I did not know how to be happy. And I was in a beautiful house with a really hot, rich husband, and I was miserable. And I proceeded to do what all good Scorpio Italian Americans do. I divorced him immediately and decided to try to figure out what the hell was going on in my life. I sold my company, and not for very much money either, by the way. People think I'm a smart businesswoman. I'm not. Like, my whole message is intuition and move when you feel to move, right? So I sold my whole company, and I moved to Los Angeles, and for 2 years, I proceed to basically shave my head, sell everything that I own, live on a mat, and do meditation, and became a tarot card reader on Venice Beach. which was probably the happiest time of my life. And like most things, I focused on, it started to become a really successful business. So one minute, I'm a tarot card reader on Venice Beach, and the next minute I have like Beverly Hills Housewives calling me at midnight going, should I leave my husband? And I'm like, I'll send you a check. And I'm like, hold on. Yes, leave your husband. So just bringing everything full circle, through that period of time, I started to be able to find out what I was really missing. And for me, the concept of what I was missing was a relationship with the divine and an understanding of the feminine, which ultimately led me to India. And I started looking at these goddesses and started thinking, why don't we have any imagery of active imagery? Oh, my time is up? That really stinks. Hi, David. I'm still talking. Let me just get to the point of my message then. My message is I'm really concerned about where the feminine is in the world. And I just want to say that, in my opinion, to be feminine means to be ruthless and to be fierce and to be compassionate and to be loving. And I'm really, really urging all of the women in this room to carry the message of what it means to be feminine to other women. And when you see women that are being told, like, oh, you're sexy or you're hot, we really, really, really need to get with the program of what it means to be feminine, because the earth is in so much trouble and we are completely out of balance. And I'm really super concerned about that. And I wish I had more time to talk. I'm sorry that I don't. Thank you.